On a beach near Salamis, the tide pulls gently at charred wood and broken shields, the sand stained black with ash. The air hangs heavy with a bitter blend of salt, smoke, and a metallic tang, something coppery, something unmistakably wrong. The Persian fleet lies in ruins, burned, scattered, defeated. Greece has emerged victorious, a triumph that poets will soon etch into marble columns and sing of in symposiums for the next 2 millennia. The clash of oars and the clash of swords have faded, leaving behind a silence broken only by the lapping waves. But from the hills beyond, a sound rises, one no epic will ever dare to capture. Screaming. Not the heroic battle cry fueled by adrenaline and the promise of a swift, glorious death, but a raw, high-pitched wail that scrapes the throat raw. A sound born of pure, unadulterated terror and the dawning, awful realization that no one is coming to help. This cry drifts down from a sprawling tent city that stretches for miles along the coastline. Thousands of canvas shelters flapping in the wind like the tattered sails of a ghost fleet. These are not military barracks, neatly ordered for soldiers. They are holding pens, makeshift cages of fabric and rope, and inside them lie the true spoils of war. Not gold, not land, but women. Daughters of Athens, Corinth, and Megara. Girls who watch their fathers fall in the streets, their blood pooling under the midday sun. Mothers who hid their children in cisterns, wells, and storage jars, whispering prayers that they might suffocate quietly, rather than be found by the invaders. These women believed the sight of their burning cities, the crackling flames, the collapsing rooftops, was the worst fate imaginable. They were wrong, for they remain alive, and what Xerxes and his commanders did to them in the months that followed transcended mere cruelty. The ancient world had a word for it, a term our modern history books prefer to soften as enslavement. But that translation falls short. What happened was systematic, calculated, a deliberate attempt to erase Greece from the inside out, to hollow it out through its own flesh and blood. The question isn't whether you can stomach the truth. It's whether you're willing to carry the weight of remembering what they endured while the rest of the world raised cups to Greek victory. If you've ever wondered why certain chapters of history are told through the lens of men on battlefields, their armor gleaming under the sun, rather than the women left behind in the smoldering ruins, you're in the right place. Here, on Crimson Historians, we dig into the archives the world has chosen to forget. Clay tablets buried beneath palace floors, mass graves no one speaks of, and one-line testimonies carved into stone by those who knew their names would be erased. Before we journey deeper into this shadowed chapter, a moment of reflection. These are stories that don't make it into Hollywood epics or school textbooks, narratives deliberately omitted from the grand tapestry of history. If you're drawn to these uncovered truths, consider subscribing. Every like, every share, every subscription helps us unearth more accounts that were buried with intent. Return with me now to that desolate coastline, for what happened next challenges everything your textbooks have chosen to tell you. The tragedy of Hylas's daughters cannot be fully understood without first dissecting the mechanism that destroyed them. Xerxes' I was more than a king. He was the living embodiment of an empire that stretched from the Indus River to the Aegean Sea, a dominion that didn't conquer solely through brute force, but through a system so intricately woven into Persian culture that it functioned like a second government. This was the harem system, a term that conjures images of silken cushions and veiled luxury in the modern imagination. But that's a distortion. It wasn't about pleasure or decadence. It was about control, taking the daughters of your enemies and transforming them into symbols of submission, breeding a new generation of mixed-blood administrators who owed their loyalty to Persia, not to the lands their mothers once called home. When Xerxes launched his invasion of Greece in 480 BCE, he brought with him an army of 500,000 men. Soldiers, yes, but also a different kind of force. Slavers, scribes and officials whose task wasn't to fight, but to catalog the aftermath. They recorded every city that fell, every island that surrendered, every village that resisted and burned to the ground. Their tablets noted who lived, who died, and, most critically, who could be taken. The girls were the priority, not because the Persians were uniquely cruel. Many ancient empires employed similar tactics, but because Xerxes grasped a truth most conquerors overlooked. You don't defeat a people merely by killing their men on the battlefield. You defeat them by taking their daughters, by ensuring the next generation grows up speaking your language, worshiping your gods, and forgetting the homes their mothers wept for. By the time the Persian army retreated after the naval defeat at Salamis and the land battle at Plataea, over 40,000 Greek women and children had been absorbed into the Persian administrative network. Most were shipped east to cities like Sardis and Susa, some placed in estates as domestic labor, and others, especially the young, the beautiful, the daughters of noble families, were taken into the royal harem system. Not for the reasons you might imagine, not for fleeting indulgence, but for a calculated process of integration. If this moment in history doesn't stir you to learn more, you might be missing the lesson our ancestors died to impart. The most dangerous thing an empire can do isn't to kill you outright, it's to make you forget who you were. Let's move to the beach at Phaleron, just south of Athens, in the summer of 479 BCE. The Persian army is preparing to retreat, but they won't leave empty-handed. Greek civilians, those who didn't flee in time, those too old or too young or too stubborn to run, are being processed. That's the word the Persians used, processed, as if these human lives were no different from grain or timber or cargo to be shipped. Overseeing this operation is a man named Artabazos, a Persian general whose name appears in Herodotus's histories and on administrative seals unearthed from the ruins of Persepolis. He's not watching the battlefield, he's watching the harvest. That's what they called it in Persian, berifton, the taking of yield. The women are separated first, then sorted by age with a cold, clinical precision. Girls under 12 are sent to one group, destined to be raised as servants, taught Persian until the Greek words for mother and home feel foreign on their tongues. Women over 30 are dispatched to labor camps in Thrace or Phrygia, places where life expectancy is measured in seasons, not years. But it's the ones in between, those aged 13 to 25, who draw Artabazos' personal attention. A girl is pulled from the line, perhaps 16, from Megara. Her hair is matted with dust and salt, her tunic torn at the shoulder. She doesn't resist, not because she's compliant, but because she's already learned what happens when you do. Her mother screams anyway, a desperate, guttural sound, and a Persian soldier strikes her across the face, hard enough to drop her to her knees. But he doesn't kill her. They need her alive to watch, because that's part of the system too. You don't just take the daughters, you make the mothers understand that resistance is futile, that even their daughters' bodies now belong to the empire. The girl from Megara is led to a tent where inside waits a scribe, Persian, seated at a low table with clay tablets and a stylus. He doesn't look at her face. He examines her teeth, her hands, the way she stands, recording details, age, height, condition of teeth, presence of scars, evidence of virginity. These aren't soldiers, they're administrators. This is a bureaucracy at work. An intact seal from Persepolis, translated in the 1930s by German archaeologist Ernst Herzfeld, includes a line that reads, "Delivered to Susa, 120 Greek females, ages 14 to 22, sorted and prepared for royal service from Athens, Thebes, and Corinth. Condition acceptable." That's how the Persian Empire saw the daughters of Hellas, as inventory, as assets to be cataloged and distributed. But here's where it grows darker, because what happened next wasn't random cruelty, it was policy. The girls selected for the harem system were put on ships headed east, but not all at once. Some were held back, kept in camps along the coast of Asia Minor for weeks, sometimes months. Why? Because the Persians had learned from previous conquests that if you take a woman and immediately place her in service, she resists. She remembers her home, clings to hope that someone will ransom her, that the gods will intervene. But if you break her first, if you strip her of her name, her language, her sense of self, then she integrates more smoothly. And the most effective way to break someone isn't through violence alone. It's through humiliation, through forcing them to participate in their own erasure. There's a fragmentary account preserved in a collection of Greek epitaphs from the 4th century BCE, a woman named Clitis from Corinth. She was 13 when the Persians took her. She survived, and decades later, as an old woman, she returned to Greece, leaving an inscription at a temple near Olympia. It reads, "I was Clitis, daughter of Nicodemus." They took me in the year of the fire. They gave me a new name. I will not speak it. I served in the house of the king's cousin for 16 years. When they freed me, I had forgotten the hymns my mother taught me. I have come here to remember. This stone will remember for me. She was 29 when she was freed, and she had forgotten the hymns. That's not enslavement, that's cultural annihilation. The camps where these women were held weren't prisons in the traditional sense. They were re-education centers. Girls were taught Persian, how to bow in the Persian manner, how to prepare Persian food, wear Persian dress, adopt Persian mannerisms. Those who resisted were starved. Those who complied were rewarded with slightly better treatment. And those who resisted too fiercely. There's a mass grave near Sardis, excavated in 1958, containing the remains of over 300 women, dated to the early 5th century BCE. The bones show signs of malnutrition, blunt force trauma, evidence of systematic abuse. The archaeologists noted something haunting. Almost all of the skulls faced west, as if even in death, they were trying to return home. By late 479 BCE, the first wave of Greek captives reaches Susa, the administrative heart of the Persian Empire. The city is vast, a glittering sprawl of columned halls that stretch higher than any temple in Athens, gardens blooming with flowers that have no Greek names. The air smells of incense, cardamom, and something sweet the captives can't identify. And at the center of it all is the palace complex where the royal harem resides. This is where myth meets horror. The word harem conjures images from Hollywood, veils, incense, luxury. But the royal harem of Persia wasn't a brothel. It was a political institution, a place where the daughters of conquered peoples were transformed into assets of the empire. Here's how it worked. According to records from the Persepolis fortification tablets, administrative documents that survived because they were baked hard in a fire when Alexander the Great burned the city in 330 BCE, women entering the harem system were divided into ranks. At the bottom were domestic servants, above them concubines, and at the top, those selected to bear children for Persian nobles. The goal wasn't pleasure, it was integration. The children born to Greek mothers and Persian fathers would be raised as Persians, but with enough Greek blood to serve as intermediaries, translators, and administrators in the newly conquered territories. This was genetic colonialism, a strategy to blur the lines between conqueror and conquered over generations. But not every girl made it that far. Take a girl named Thalia. Her name preserved in a Babylonian administrative tablet from 477 BCE. She was 15 when she arrived at Susa. The tablet records that she refused integration and was placed in a disciplinary unit. What that meant is detailed in another document. Forced labor in the palace weaving rooms, 14 hours a day, minimal rations, no contact with other Greek women. She lasted 8 months. Cause of death? Exhaustion. But some of the girls did survive the integration. And what happened to them is in some ways worse than death because they became complicit. There's a letter, an actual letter preserved in the dry sands of Bactria and translated in the 1970s. It's from a woman named Roxane, a Greek name meaning bright. She's writing to her sister back in Thessaly. The letter is dated to around 470 BCE. She writes, "I am well. I have learned the language. I have learned the prayers. The king's steward has taken me as a secondary wife. I have given him a son. He is beautiful. He has your eyes, but he will never know your name. Please do not try to find me. I am not who I was." That final sentence, "I am not who I was," should haunt you. Because Roxane survived. She was fed, clothed, elevated in status. She had a child, and in exchange, she gave birth to a son who would grow up Persian, who would never know his mother had once prayed to Athena, who would never sing the lullabies she learned as a girl in Thessaly. This was the true strategy, not massacre. Massacre creates martyrs. Songs are written, stories are told, the dead become immortal. But assimilation, slow, methodical, bureaucratic, takes the daughters of your enemies and turns them into the mothers of your next generation of administrators. And it worked. By the mid-5th century BCE, there were thousands of mixed Greek-Persian children serving in the Achaemenid administration. Scribes, soldiers, even governors of the very territories their mothers had once called home. Xerxes didn't just invade Greece. He tried to absorb it, to rewrite its future through its own bloodlines. If you're still watching, it's because part of you knows the story needs to be told. Subscribe to Crimson Historians, not for us, but for them. For the girls whose names were erased. For the mothers who watched their daughters taken east and never saw them again. This is their testimony, and it only survives if we refuse to let it be forgotten. Not all of them stayed in Persia. Some, very few, but some, came back. In the decades after the Persian Wars, as Greek city-states solidified their power and Persia's grip on the Aegean weakened, a trickle of women began returning home, freed by sympathetic owners, ransomed by desperate families, or, in rare cases, escaped. But when they came back, they found that home didn't exist anymore. There's an inscription from Eritrea, dated to around 460 BCE, that tells a story modern historians rarely discuss. A woman named Harmonia returned after 12 years in Persian captivity. She was 28. She had a child with her, a boy, half Persian, perhaps 6 years old. The city of Eritrea refused to recognize her citizenship. Her family refused to take her in. The reason, recorded bluntly in the city's legal archives, was that she had been defiled by barbarian touch and born a child of mixed blood. To accept her would be to accept the enemy. She and her son were turned away. The inscription ends there. We don't know what happened to them. This is the part of the story that doesn't fit the heroic narrative. Because Greece won the war, Athens became the cradle of democracy, philosophy, and art. The Persian threat was repelled. Poets wrote epics, sculptors carved marble, and no one wanted to talk about the daughters who came back broken or the ones who never came back at all. A historian named Theopompus, writing in the 4th century BCE, made a passing reference to the silent women. Greek survivors of Persian captivity who lived on the margins of society, unable to reintegrate, unable to speak of what had been done to them. He wrote, "They are like shadows. They move through the agora, but no one sees them. They were taken, and though they returned, they are still gone." And then, over time, they stopped calling them anything at all. By the time Herodotus wrote his histories in the 440s and 430s BCE, the focus was entirely on battles, strategies, the glory of Greek resistance. He mentions Persian captives once in a single line. Many Greeks were taken, but in time some returned. That's it. That's all he gave them. But the graves don't lie. Across Greece, especially in regions that saw heavy Persian occupation, archaeologists have found burial sites from the mid-5th century BCE containing women's remains with unusual characteristics, signs of malnutrition consistent with long-term captivity, skeletal trauma, and in several cases evidence of childbirth at very young ages. One such grave near ancient Thebes contained the skeleton of a woman in her early 20s. Beside her was a small clay tablet, inscribed in Greek. It reads, "I am daughter of no one. I am mother of no one. I am the forgotten. Let this mark that I was." No name, just that. So why does this story matter? Because it's not about Xerxes. It's not even about Persia. It's about what happens when empires decide that the most effective weapon isn't the sword. It's silence. Xerxes invaded Greece and lost. His fleet burned at Salamis. His army was crushed at Plataea. By every military measure, Greece won. But if you measure victory differently, if you count the daughters taken, the identities erased, the mothers who spent the rest of their lives staring at the eastern horizon, then the question becomes harder to answer. Because those women didn't die gloriously. They didn't become martyrs. Most of them simply disappeared into the administrative machinery of an empire, given new names, bore children who grew up Persian, and faded from Greek memory entirely. And Greece let them, because to remember them would have been to admit that victory came with a cost that couldn't be carved into marble or sung in an epic. It would have meant confronting the fact that empires don't just conquer land. They conquer bloodlines, languages, futures. The philosopher Plutarch, writing centuries later, left us with a thought that lingers. We remember the battles, we name the generals, we build temples to the gods who gave us victory. But the price of war is always paid by those we do not name. The daughters of Hellas paid that price, not with their deaths, but with their erasure. And here's the part that should terrify you. This strategy worked. Within 2 generations, the mixed-blood descendants of Greek captives were serving in Persian courts, governing Persian territories, speaking Persian fluently. The cultural erasure Xerxes began didn't end with his death. It rippled forward for decades, quietly, bureaucratically, until the line between conqueror and conquered blurred beyond recognition. That is what happens when you don't tell the stories of the women left behind. They don't just disappear from history, they disappear from existence. But not completely, because here we are, 2,500 years later, reading clay tablets from Persepolis, translating inscriptions from forgotten graves, finding the one-line testimonies of women who carved their pain into stone because they knew, somehow they knew, that silence was the final death. And as long as we keep reading, keep translating, keep refusing to let their voices be swallowed by time, they're still here. Not in the way they wanted, not in the way they deserved, but here. You've just witnessed one of history's darkest truths. Not the kind written into textbooks, but the kind buried in administrative records and anonymous graves. If stories like this remind you how fragile humanity is, how easily voices can be erased when no one fights to remember them, then subscribe to Crimson Historians and keep the past alive. Because some voices deserve to be heard, even if they were silenced 2,500 years ago. Especially if they were silenced 2,500 years ago.